I first wanted to start by acknowledging the real knowledge in the room that I've heard in the conversations about evaluation and assessment. I'm going to go back to those identical themes in this presentation in a way that I hope isn't redundant, but actually builds on the conversation you just started. And the topic of today's, you'll notice there's better formatting on today's PowerPoint. That's because the graduate student that I'm working with was very embarrassed by yesterday's presentation. And he sent me a new template to adjust the presentation. So the title of the talk is Family Engagement, What Counts, Who Counts It, and Does It Help? And it's a way to get our brains thinking about the question of evaluation and assessment of the different initiatives that we care about. And I've got a very straightforward agenda for us. I should say that I won't go till 11:30 as scheduled in the agenda. I can't talk for that long. I'd maybe sing or something. But the agenda will be, the first approach is I'm going to talk about the dilemmas of assessment. You know, I'm an academic, so I'm interested in putting some complexities on the table and then having the folks who then have to actually do this work figure out how to negotiate through those complexities. And we're going to consider some of the current practices and ponder some future directions. And then, to make things a little bit more concrete and practical, I'm going to have us take a look at a very specific new initiative from a parent organization in Ontario that you might be familiar with. That organization is called People for Education. And they've got a new project that actually is fascinating. And it's called Broader Measures of School Success. So we'll take a look at that. So it's a kind of complexity examination and then a look at a specific project. And I was interested also, I should say, I appreciate the friendliness with which I've been received here. And yesterday at the sort of cocktail moment before dinner, I was happy to hear that a couple of folks said that they were Googling during the talk that I gave and looking up some of the resources that appeared in the slides. That actually is one of my purposes in this, is to try to share resources that you might not be familiar with, or particular publications that you might not be aware of, so that you can track them down for yourselves and they may be useful. Okay, so that's that. All right, now, I apologize for turning my back here, but the slides that I've got for today are a little more text heavy than the slides from yesterday. Yesterday was mostly an outline. Here I've got some full quotes that I want you to take a look at. And the reason I made that decision was because I think other writers can say it better than I can about what some of the dilemmas are. And I just want to start our conversation and our thinking about evaluation and assessment with this quote from the American researcher, Gloria Ladson-Billings. And she says, "Teachers from a suburban school invite me to talk with them about a problem they're experiencing. They can't get the African-American and Hmong parents to come to school. I arrive at the meeting and begin with this question. Suppose you arrive at school tomorrow morning and every African-American and Hmong parent in this school is here. What would you have them do?" And the teachers sit in stunned silence. Okay? So the reason I start with this is first because I think it's a little bit provocative. And second, I think it's useful because we sort of, when we get involved in these conversations about parental engagement, we seem to have this idea, more is better, we should be doing more of it. There are these obstacles, it's a kind of set storyline. But we haven't really allowed our imaginations to consider what would we do if we had what we say we want, which is everybody involved. And part of what might get us there would be some assessment and evaluation strategies. So I wanted to start with that quote from Ladson-Billings. Now, if we want, what kinds of assessment and evaluation data do policymakers actually have regarding schools' work with parents? Now, there is a lot of research, but how much evaluation data do practitioners have about what they're doing? And the short answer is there isn't a lot that is systematically collected. And that's part of the tension that I'm hoping we'll pay attention to right now. So, as we talked about yesterday, Since parental engagement includes both inside school and outside school activities, an evaluation design that seeks evidence only from one of those locations is likely to provide an incomplete or possibly inaccurate picture. And also complicating the issue here is the fact that accumulating evidence of activities is not the same as assessing impact. So you can sort of check and say, yeah, we've had these particular events. Yes, we've had these, someone was saying at my table this morning, we've had bums in seats. But we don't know whether or not those have any impact. So how do we consider evaluation of assessment activities that consider the topic of impact? Yeah. As we talked about yesterday, parental engagement with schools takes many forms. It's called many things: involvement, partnerships, school and community connections. That's a multitude of labels that matters for an evaluation. Also, it doesn't just matter for how you think about the activities you want to plan, but it also matters for evaluation. And the first step in formulating a plan of assessment is defining what you're going to assess. And so what actions or beliefs or impact do you want to assess? We're going to get to a moment where you're actually going to talk about this again at your tables. Now, from my perspective, we have a couple of models that we could think about if we want to begin the approach to constructing assessment or designing assessment tools. So one is, we can go and look at Henderson, who's provided us a framework for thinking about what parental engagement is. Parents as partners, parents as collaborators and problem solvers, parents as audience, parents as supporters, parents as advisors and our co-decision makers. We've also got Joyce Epstein, who's saying there's type 1 parental involvement, which is parenting, what folks are doing in the home. We've got type 2, which is communication between home and school. We've got type 3, which is volunteering, type 4, learning at home, type 5, decision making. You can imagine an assessment design that is structured around either of those kinds of categories to try to get an understanding of what's going on. But again, the evidence of activity in these different realms isn't the same as the evidence of impact. And that's why articulating what it is that you hope to accomplish is an important first step for designing any kind of assessment activity. There's not just the evidence of impact, but the quality and depth. So I think one of the things, yesterday we talked a little bit about the importance of frameworks for assessing our own work. And one of the tensions here in designing a kind of baseline framework for understanding parental involvement activities is, are frameworks actually motivating people to change their practice, which is what we're looking for. We're looking for improvement and change. Or do frameworks provide people with a vocabulary so that what they end up saying is, yeah, I'm actually doing that. Does everybody always already see themselves in that framework? And if that's the case, then the framework isn't provoking the kind of motivation for change and forward progress that we would hope for. So you have to think about that tension between, the existence of a certain kind of activity and its value. And then the final question here is, in an assessment that you're thinking about doing around parental engagement activities, what's being compared? All assessments are kind of comparison. Are you comparing school A to school B? Are you comparing the activities of school A in 2014 to the activities in school A in 2012? What's the point of comparison? Are you comparing the activities in school A to where you hope to go? Articulating what that point of comparison actually matters, because I think we've heard some of the conversations this morning. You don't want to be collecting data that's a waste of everyone's time. People have limited amount of time during the day. To ask people to produce a report that sits on a shelf or is only designed for external eyes and isn't being used internally, that's not going to get you very far. So you have to think about what your point of comparison is. And not all points of comparison are particularly useful. I'm not sure how helpful for a particular school's efforts to engage parents, a comparison to the school down the road is going to be. Because that's not going to help them understand their particular context or challenges any better. But we can have a conversation about that. Okay. Now another tension in thinking about evaluation is this tension between standardized approaches and context-based approaches. And policymakers are kind of contradictory on this. On the one hand, we want a framework that applies to everyone, and on the other hand, we want people to be able to see themselves in their own local context. And I'll ask you, as you start to think about your own jurisdictions and your own organizations, to debate the pros and cons of the different approaches, a standardized, centralized approach versus a more particular or context-based approach. So the question on the table is, how context-specific should these approaches be? We know that rural versus urban schools have quite different ways and different potential and also obstacles for engaging with families and communities. So does that mean that there's a different framework for a rural school than there is for an urban school? Or do you write a framework or an assessment criteria in such a way that you can have different kinds of approaches? Now, the strength of a particular, allowing different contexts to develop it on their own is they're more likely to know exactly what those concrete goals and obstacles are. The limitation is it may be, if I'm allowed to design what I'm being assessed on, I might write that structure in such a way that it avoids the things that are really most important to change. Right? So you have to think about, what kind of lever you're trying to pull with the assessment criteria here. Now the final point here, before I get you to talk at your tables, is I want you to think about what would emerge from assessment and evaluation criteria if we thought about assessment itself as a form of parental engagement. Instead of thinking about it as something that we do afterwards, you think about it as part of the way of engaging the community, where you're sitting down with people who have valuable perspectives to share with you about your organization, and you use that opportunity as itself a convening event to move engagement forward. I'm not sure folks tend to think of evaluation or assessment that way. They think of it as an add-on, as a kind of high-stakes gamble where you're being looked at with certain kinds of consequences. But instead, if you thought about it as not just some sort of summative project, we did well, we didn't do well, but a formative one that itself could build trust, that might be a useful way to beginning to think about this material. Okay. Typical approaches to assessment have, in my assessment of the literature, have gone into basically three categories. Researchers tend to focus on school councils or other kinds of school decision-making committees to see, A, whether or not they're up and running, B, who's involved in them, C, what kinds of topics they tackle. So, that's going to tell you some things, but not all things about parental engagement. There's a real focus on the sort of formal mechanisms. That's one set of research. A second set of research is focused on specific outreach programs. So when schools do certain things, or when community agencies do certain things, a program evaluation will tell you these things worked, those other things did not work. That's another category. And then the third kind of assessment is this focus on parent satisfaction. Now, parent satisfaction, as I talked about a little yesterday, is, like all research is going to tell you some things, but not all things. I'm not sure parent satisfaction, actually I am sure that parent satisfaction is not the equivalent of parental engagement. For the same way that we talked about, or that I mentioned yesterday, you can imagine a scenario with high parental satisfaction and in fact low engagement, or vice versa. And so trying to think through the utility of a parental satisfaction survey, I think is significant. One of the comments earlier this morning, and I don't remember it was in this part of the room, I think, talked about, one of the dilemmas of surveying parents is how do you know what you don't know? So asking parents to talk about their satisfaction of parental engagement assumes that they have some point of comparison or some other place, some other experience of school to compare it to. So it's not necessarily a terribly productive way of assessing actually the material of engagement. Again, a happily engaged set of families and communities is going to probably lead to a more positive school. But that's not the same thing as assessing parental engagement activities. Okay. Now finally, this is a whole lot of words. And what I'm putting this up here, first of all, because I feel I'm always look for an opportunity to share the title of this book. It's called The Policy Paradox, The Art of Political Decision Making. It's by Deborah Stone. It's a fantastic book, and it lays out the multitude of complexities involved in trying to use policy to solve a problem. And what she calls the policy paradox is policy will solve problems, it also creates new ones, right? And so, she's not a cynic, she's an optimist about the kind of sausage making that is involved in making policy to try to make the world a better place. But she does lay out for us that you have to really think carefully about what some of the different tensions are. And she's got a chapter in her book called Numbers. And, I think we've heard, somebody said, earlier talked about what data can actually tell us. Our data getting to the heart of what matters. Yesterday we heard about we should be thinking about parental engagement as a mindset. A mindset is hard to quantify, but policymakers, I think, quite reasonably often want a quantifiable touchstone for whether or not particular investments make any sense. And Deborah Stone talks about numbers in that sense. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. She says, numbers in policy debates cannot be understood without probing how they are produced by people. What makes people decide to count something and then find instances of it? How are the measures and the measured linked together? What incentives do people have to make the numbers appear high or low? And what opportunities do they have to behave strategically? People change the activities that are being measured. They try to influence the measures. The exercise of counting makes them notice things more. Measurers change the way they count because their measures affect how they, not only the measured, are treated. The things being counted become bargaining chips in a strategic relationship between the measurers and the measured, so that at different points in the relationship there are very different pressures to reveal and conceal. The choice of measures is part of a strategic problem definition, and the results of measures take on their political character only with the costume of interpretive language. Okay, so, she's got some strong statements in there. The point here is, you're going to be making decisions as you move down the path of trying to articulate assessment and evaluation about numbers, about counting, about identifying what kinds of activities, what kinds of results you find most interesting. That is hopefully going to be really concretely connected to your goals, but you would be misleading yourself if you didn't think that that's also a political argument. And I'm talking political small p. It's a disagreement about, or it's going to be a challenging philosophical argument that you're also having about what matters. And there is some shared agreement about what matters in parental engagement activities, but not universal. So that's part of what this is a challenge for. So, now, counting parents at a meeting or evaluating outreach programs or surveying parental satisfaction all tell us something about parents' interactions with schools, but they divert our attention from the ways that deficit orientations shape schools' willingness to extend themselves to parents or children, for example, or if they encourage educators to gloss over the disagreements that might arise when public schools take the public seriously, then what we will have developed will be a set of tools that works at cross purposes to the goal of actually engaging people more authentically. So the challenge in developing assessments is not to oversimplify the job, the work that you're trying to accomplish, but to try to design something that captures that complexity in all of its potential conflicts. And that's not an easy chore. All right, in short, it's not just a technical or philosophical complexity that explains why these policies are so rarely evaluated. There's also a political challenge that this political nature of any of the assessments makes the wide range of stakeholders potentially nervous. So yesterday, one of the things I asked you to do at your tables, and we're getting to the activity now that I'm going to have you do, was to think about the theory of action that you believe underlies your interest in working in family, school, community engagement. What is it about this engagement activity that is going to result in some kind of new change that wouldn't have resulted had you not done these activities? Fancy way academics call it is a theory of action. So these writers, City, Elmore, Fierman, and Title, the biggest name, or the most well-known name in that list is Richard Elmore. He's a professor at Harvard. And he's been working for several years with research assistants and other practitioners around this idea of instructional rounds in education. Instructional rounds meaning sort of like a medical model that groups of educators in schools identify problems of practice and then try to make them better, as medical students and doctors do as they are learning how to improve the care of particular ill people in hospitals. So one of the things that he's been trying to get people to think about is kind of identifying, it's kind of political science-y theory of action that will undergird your approach to trying to make change in a school. Why do you think that putting your effort in this direction is going to be better than putting your effort in that direction? And basically, a theory of action is a statement of a causal relationship between what I do and what constitutes the good result in the classroom. He's focused on the classroom. The next is it's empirically falsifiable. So in other words, if you collected evidence that showed that that had not happened, the relationship you assumed would happen had not happened, then you have to change your theory of action, or you have to try to understand what didn't work. And the third is it has to be open-ended. If you really wanted to use theory of action inside organizations to try to make things better, you can't just have it be anchored in one way and then just move on. It has to be open-ended enough that you can revise it and work on it and change it. So here's an example that he shares in his book that says, if we continue, here's an example of how they articulated a theory of action. I share it not because it's directly connected to parental engagement, but just to give you a sense of the language. If we continually develop the instructional expertise of our teachers, then teaching will be strengthened and all students will learn in deeper and more meaningful ways. So you've got an if-then, right? If we do this, then these other things will result. Or, at a greater degree of detail, we will embed ongoing professional development in our regular schedule and specifically develop teachers' pedagogical content knowledge in reading, writing, math, science, and social studies, etc. Okay, so it gives you get a sense of, it's not just if-then, but it's a little bit more of the how. And we heard yesterday in some of the conversations that people really want more how in doing this work. So here's an example of some of that detail. So another way of explaining the theory of action is it basically describes your purpose, which is why I started with that yesterday, your work and activities about which you know the most, and your evidence, which is what we're focused on now, that your work and purposes were connected. Okay? So you have to, that's on you and your organizations you're working with, is to provide evidence that work mattered. Now what I want you to do at the tables right now, and this will be about 10-ish minutes, is to have a conversation shaped around these three questions. The first is, what kind of information would you like to have about the impact or effectiveness of your parental engagement efforts? First, it's kind of blue sky answer. What would be good to have? Next, how do you resolve the tension between standardized, everyone should do the same thing, versus locally developed assessment measures? Where do you fall in that conversation? It may not be a debate for you. You may think that actually the standardized approach is the best approach. If so, say so. And the third question that I want you to talk about is, what examples do you have? This is a room full of a lot of knowledge and experience from across the whole country. So thinking about what examples you have from your own practice of attempts to assess quality and impact of parental engagement efforts. When you start to think about it, what evidence have you ever used to show that this is the right way to move, this is the right way to direct your time and effort inside the organization you're working? So take about 10-ish minutes to have that conversation with your team.